Bienvenidos a la franja de Arquitecto de tu Vida, al programa Hablando de Crianza con Lourdes Garcia.
Hi everyone, hi. I'm so glad to meet you again in English. Now, this is our English interview, and now is Baheya Sirry here with me. She's a conscious parenting coach from Dr. Shefali's cohorts, and she's also the mother of 3 beautiful children. And you can find her website and her Instagram and Facebook account as lightheartedparent.com. So Baheya wrote an article recently that I liked very much about why is parenting so hard. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi Baheya, how are you?
Hi Lourdes, thank you so much for having me on your channel.
I'm so glad you're here with me. Thank you for your time. So you wrote this article that I'm sharing also in my Facebook page, which is why is parenting really this hard? What inspired you to write about this?
Well, I think everybody knows that parenting is a lot of work. We can't take that away from being a parent. You chose to have the parents, the children, I mean, you're going to have to hold them, you're going to have to feed them, you're going to have to take care of them when they're sick, right? There's already all of this stuff that is a huge responsibility for parents. And we can't take that away, but there's so much more that parents do to add to the work and the stress and the exhaustion from being a parent. And this is why I named my business Lighthearted Parent, because I want to remove all of this heaviness and all of these burdens from the parent's heart, remove everything that is, I think, really unnecessary. And if we do the necessary work, we can recognize the things that are standing in our way of having a very fluid and harmonious and peaceful family life. So this article was not about the hard stuff like, oh my God, I have to take my kid to school and I have to plan the meals and I have to keep the laundry clean. We got to do that stuff. But this is about the added expectations, the added fears, the added, stresses that we add that we can think of releasing somehow.
All the emotional burden that we carry as moms or dads.
Yes, absolutely. And that emotional burden can come from a lot of things, right? It can come from the people around us, what they say, our fear of people's opinions, our fear of the future, or just an image of what we think our kids should be, such as the straight A's or the top football player, or, super clean, always clean and very well dressed. I mean, of course, your kids have to be clean, but what I mean is like well put together. Your kids can dress messy and have messy hair. It's the time of their life where they can do that. But sadly, we can find ourselves bumping heads, going into these battles about things that we don't really need to fight with them about. And it's interesting to kind of go back and recognize all that so that you see what matters to you and your child and to your family values. And that you can just enjoy being a parent, because parents very often forget to enjoy it. They forget to enjoy it because they're living in just constant stress and insecurities and expectations and shoulds. So that's kind of what the article was about.
Yeah, I understand it's kind of the essence of the work you do, because you're so focused on making this easier for everyone. And sometimes you have these Instagrammers or these bloggers, and they tell you, oh my God, having kids is so wonderful, and this is my perfect family, and this is our perfect vacation, and this is our perfect kitchen. And they make you feel so so terrible, so frustrated, so but behind, like you're not doing a great job. But that simply isn't real. That's just a picture, and it took hours to take a perfect picture with a kid. It takes hours.
Yeah.
So being an Instagrammer of a perfect life, it's really a full-time job to take those pictures. And we don't realize that. So someone has to talk about the reality, you know? Someone has to start this conversation about why are we making it ourselves so hard?
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned social media. In my article, I talk about two different aspects from social media. The first one is what you mentioned, which is like how everything looks perfect. And I wanted to remind parents that usually when you have an Instagram account or any social media account where everything looks absolutely beautiful, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beautiful, perfect pictures, it's their job.
Yeah.
It's actually part of their job. They have sponsors, or they're selling a particular product, or they are home designers sometimes, or, you know, it can be a job. So don't compare your day-to-day to that, and realize that there's a lot of effort that went into this. But the other aspect about social media that parents need to be careful about is there's a lot of parenting advice out there, a lot about use this kind of language and be like this with your child and respond like this. And if you do this, you've screwed up your kid for life. This is a typical one, right?
Yeah.
Can we hold on a second?
Yeah.
You can stop. Great.
Okay.
So the amount of advice that is out there can make you feel like you're doing everything wrong. And it can just add to the anxiety, right? It'll be like, oh my God, but I punished my child. You know, if I used to punish my kid all the time, you know, my kid's going to be messed up for life. Or I speak to them in this language, but I'm supposed to speak to them using these types of words. So it can add a lot of anxiety because you're getting all of this advice that may or may not be good. And even if it's excellent advice, which it may be, it's okay if you don't do it all perfectly all the time. Nobody does it. So say you're following, you know, a bunch of parenting coaches or psychologists who specialize in children. That's great. They'll give you a lot of tips, but don't let it add to your anxiety about how you are with your kid. Because even these parent coaches and even these psychologists in their own homes, you know, they're not doing things like this all the time. Look, I always remember when Dr. Shefali told us, she said, I ask myself with my own daughter, what would Dr. Shefali do? Because
it's really fun.
You can have all the books, you could have the perfect scripts, right? Yeah. It's not always going to come to you, you know, and you have to find your own way of talking to them, your own way of responding to them. And so to me, this is another aspect of social media that adds stress to the parents. It's not just look how perfect we look. It's this is how you have to talk, and this is how you have to be with them, and this is how you have to respond to them, or else you've messed up your children. And that adds a lot of pressure to the parents. And I hear parents be like, oh my God, I've done all this. Oh my God, my kid's going to be all messed up. And I'm like, no, you know, of course they're going to have some wounds. Every child does. It's just part of the journey. That's okay. You learn from it, you grow from it, but don't let it burden you or stress you out.
And yet here we are giving more advice.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what I make fun of my own advice in that blog post, where I'm like, yes, I realize that it's
this is another one.
Exactly. But yeah, you don't have to do everything that I say. You can just pick what works, you know, pick what works, pick what speaks to you when it speaks to you. And then if you do it one day, great. If you don't do it the next day, there's no point in stressing out about it. As long as the energy behind your interaction with your child is flowing and it's good and it comes from a good place.
So I like to say a little bit of solutions and not so much the difficult part.
Absolutely.
So if someone detects, if someone realizes right now that, yeah, I'm getting a lot of pressure about perfect parenting, and I don't know how to choose between what to listen to and what to ignore, what tip would you give that mother?
The first thing I would do is I would actually cut out, if you're getting all of these tips from newsletters, blog posts, in social media, cut out as much of it as you can. Cut out as much of it as you can, and then try to focus on the conscious parenting aspect, because this is the source of it. Once you start to really look within, see how you're doing, where your insecurities are coming from, where your fears are really coming from, once you're capable of healing this, then you can start to consider, maybe different tools or different strategies or different language. But I personally think that once you've done a lot of this work, the things are, the tools and the language is going to start coming to you a lot more naturally. So of course, if you have serious fears around it and you can't control it, then I would recommend that you speak to someone. And you don't even really have to have a lot of sessions. Sometimes I'll speak to parents, and just with their intro first free session, they already feel like they have something to work with, because they can't afford to take more sessions, and that's just fine. But talking to someone makes a world of difference. It makes a world of difference. So number one would be cut out all the excess information that you get, because we get an overload of information. And if it means you have to stop following me on Instagram, please, that's okay. I won't be upset. But don't hesitate to talk to a coach, right? Like every coach talks to the parent usually for free for the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is. Don't hesitate to reach out to someone, because just having one conversation can really change things. And if you don't want to talk to a coach, maybe talk to a friend. But the source of it really is to start looking within.
Okay, so it's not to focus on the children, on the behavior, on the discipline journey. It's just to focus on yourself, right? To realize where this is all coming from and fix it within yourself.
Oh, yes, that's always the first step. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is always the first step. And then afterwards, once you've calmed yourself down anyway, then you start to really understand what's going on with your child. And if you need more help, or if your child really needs, more help, or you need to find a tool, or you need to change the way that you speak, or you need to do some problem solving with your child, then you can do it. But you will never be able to do it if you're triggered and angry and mad. Look, there are times when I'll be in a tense situation with my kids, and I'll say exactly the words that I'm supposed to say according to the books of the perfect parent, right?
Yeah.
But because my energy is so just triggered and angry and stressed, and I just want to get this over and done with, because I have something else to do, kid, this is all inside of me.
Yeah.
He literally looked at me and he's like, I can't do it, Mom, when you're like this,
Oh my God. So
they
wise.
feel it. They feel it before you feel it, right? So you can come up to them and use the right words that all of the positive discipliners are giving you, and they're doing fantastic work, right? Like there's fantastic information around positive discipline, gentle discipline. It's all great. But if you haven't done the consciousness work so that you're really calm and connected and able to be present, oh, your kid's going to call you on it. They know. They know. And the thing is, once they know, it upsets me even more, because I'm like, oh my God.
It's like you become the kid.
It's like, oh, 100%. Sometimes, like say I'm like this morning, I was with my 8.5-year-old child. And I think at a certain point, he was 8.5 and I was like 6.
Oh my God. That happens to all of us. Yeah.
It happens to all of us. And you have to be, you have to be grateful for these moments.
Yeah. You have to be grateful to be with such wise kids. they
Yes,
can call you on
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? It's funny because when I talk to parents, as soon as a parent hears I'm a parent coach, they become almost intimidated and like they feel like, oh my God, must be the perfect parent. And of course, that's not true, right? Like I have a list of everything wrong that I've done and that I'm still doing because I'm still learning. But if there's one thing I've done right, and that was before I became a conscious parenting coach, before I even started to shift the way that I parent, is that I always gave my kids a voice. They've never shut down their opinions and their voice. And it's too much sometimes. It can be a lot, but I'm happy that until now, they can still speak their opinions, even, when I'm getting upset or whatever, their voice comes out, which is definitely something that I think a lot of us did not have when we were little.
Yeah.
We did not have that. I know I did not have my voice like this.
Yeah, that's a big step. That's a big step.
Having your kids have their voice, absolutely. You don't have to like what they're going to say. Most of the time, I don't like what they're saying. But yeah, it's important for them to have their voice.
Yeah. Okay. And besides social media, what other difficulties have you identified?
So I think, we talked quite a bit about the conscious parenting stuff, but I think in addition to this, it's, I talk about how nowadays there's a lot of research. You're right. We understand a lot more about child's development, about how the child's brain functions, etc. And it's very difficult for us to now have to change the way that we discipline our child. Yes. Because you have
traditional parenting from the 50s, and now neuroscience that's bringing us all of this new information.
Exactly. And that adds another layer to it, because it's like, I was yelled at, I was punished, I was threatened, my toys were taken away from me. These were the tools that our parents used. They meant well, they loved us, and they meant well. They just genuinely believed this is what's good for their child. Now that all of these studies show that the more you yell, the more you punish, etc., the child's going to behave more and worse and worse. And even if the child ends up becoming obedient, you've just shut down their entire personality, their entire sense of strength. The child that you've shut down when they were little, that shutting down stays with them for life. So now that we have this science, but we don't have the tools, we don't know how to do it. And I think it's a difficult balance, because it's like, okay, well, let me do this differently. So I have to go out there, and this is where, more positive discipline, and this is where we have to learn these skills. And the other tricky part is making peace with our past, because sometimes I hear people go like, oh, I'm so mad at my parents. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not about being mad at your parents. Like, it's about
because
making
they didn't
peace.
know better. There were no better information.
They didn't know better. And of course, I'm sure some parents have had really extreme cases. Maybe that was abusive when they were young. But for example, for me, that wasn't the case. I was not abused, but I still had all of these things that had a very detrimental impact on me. And so I'm working through it today. I'm trying to find new ways to get my child's cooperation, to teach my child how to speak a certain way without using these harsh methods. And you have to do it while making peace with your parenting past and forgiving your parents, really. So I think it's an ongoing, it adds, once you gain this awareness, this is when it becomes easier. It becomes easier once you accept all this, but until you accept it, I think it's a lot harder.
Yes, that makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, this sort of goes hand in hand with all of these emotions that our kids bring up in us and our inner child wounds, right? I think a lot of people, a lot of parents see themselves have reactions once they become parents that they've never had before.
Yes.
Right.
Like when you were a kid and you made an emotional bid, like an attention bid, and you started crying, for example, because that's what you did.
Yeah.
And instead of paying attention to you, you were shut out. And you were
Yeah.
said, you shouldn't cry right now. You shouldn't. So this shouldn't just made you feel so inadequate, so wrong about yourself. You grew up with these wounds, with this separation between you and your inner voice.
Yeah.
And now this inner voice reacts when your child starts crying because you
Exactly.
shouldn't cry.
Yeah.
But this
Exactly.
now comes neuroscience, and they say, no, it's okay to cry. We should let kids cry. So what do you do with this wound, with this inner child that is, no, you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't cry. What do you do with that? It's so inside.
It's so inside and it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because even if neuroscience comes and tells you it's normal for your child to cry, it's healthy, it's an emotion, it's a release, it's going to pass, that doesn't take away from your own discomfort. So intellectually, I'm like, my child is having a tantrum. It's okay. It is not an embarrassment. It is not wrong. It is not a representation of who I am as a parent, but I still feel this. And so, I mean, I think we both know the work is learning to sit with this feeling, learning to listen to it. Where is it coming from? Let me write about it. And the more you learn to sit with it, the more you become comfortable with it, the more eventually it gets released, and the more you're capable of being there with your child when they are having their tantrum and they just need your presence. They don't need anything else. Don't fix the tantrum. They just need your loving presence. But they can only get that loving presence once you start to release this discomfort that's been locked up for like 30 years or 40 years. So this is a very tricky, that's a very tricky part of it, but it's important to take the time to do this. I've had parents tell me, yeah, but I don't have time to do all this work. Like, yeah, but first of all, it's not even time, it's awareness.
Yeah.
It's
Sometimes
not even time,
it happens
it's awareness.
really fast.
It happens really fast, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. The reaction will happen fast, but it's not work like you have to read books about it. You just have to learn how to feel it. And then you can write about it for 5-10 minutes. That's in terms of time, that's what it takes. And this can significantly help you in decreasing the length of those tantrums.
Yes, so it's like preventing work. You use some time to sit with it, to feel it, to write about it, but then you will save time of tantrums. So it's worth it.
100%. And you'll save time with those tantrums, and you'll save time along the way, right? It goes into, because right now we're thinking tantrums. I guess we're talking more about the younger children, the toddlers, which I think is when we have our toddlers that the beginning of these triggers start popping up. You know, when you have a baby, you're just tired. You're really tired. Like, is the baby sleeping? Do I change the diaper? I'm tired. Let me feed the baby. But the real triggers, I think the real inner child stuff starts popping up when you've got the toddlers. And you know, doing a lot of that work, if you can, during these early years is so important, because it sets you up for, I'm not going to say success, because who knows what's going to happen. Stuff is always going to come up. So there's no success. There's just growing and learning and making things easier and, you know, more harmonious in your home. But it sets you up for a much healthier and smooth path the earlier you do this. And trust me, I started late. I started quite late. And so not only am I dealing with my own inner child wounds, now I'm dealing with the ones that I've given to my child.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder. So definitely the earlier your child is. And I think what comes up with your toddler is easier to work with than what's going to come up with your preteen or your teen if you haven't done any work before. So that was the part about the inner child wounds resurfacing. And the next part I talk about is questioning ourselves. And again, it's all related.
Yeah.
It's all related, right? You're constantly questioning yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Am I a good parent? Is my child eating well enough? Is my child this? Is my child stimulated enough? Is he or she going to the right school? Is he, all that stuff? Again, it comes back to you, to your belief systems, right? Your kid is not the one who cares about all these things. It's you. It's added pressure that you put on yourself. And it all comes down to, what are you so unsure of? Why are you so unsure of the decisions that you're making for and with your child? So it's you think your voice is not good enough, you think your opinion isn't good enough, you think someone else is doing it better. So it's all of these questions to ask yourself and to bring them back to your own childhood. Where is it coming from? Why do I question myself? And you do it item by item, right? Because we're not going to be questioning ourselves for the same things, right? You might be questioning yourself about your child's meals.
Yes.
And so you have a lot of anxiety and questioning around meals. I might have a lot of anxiety and questioning around schools. Another parent can have a lot of questions and anxiety around appearance, around cleanliness, around all sorts of things, gender roles, who knows, what your own questioning is, but you need to recognize it. You need to recognize where it's coming from, because there's no perfect way to do it, right? There's no perfect way to do it. There's just the connected way to do it.
Yes. So we have this judgmental inner voice, like a critical parent that's judging you and signaling you all the time and saying you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. So this this feeling about not being good enough all the time, finding out where does it come from makes all the difference, because then you can work on it and it will go away.
Yeah.
Will it eventually disappear? Do you think we can reach that goal, that state where this judgmental voice disappears at all?
It hasn't disappeared for me, but I'm at a point, and I think for now it's great. It's at the point where I recognize it and I hear the voice, and I can look at it and say, no, you're a liar. It's not true.
So you can make fun of your own voice.
I can make fun of my own voice, and I can write if I have a small journaling routine every morning. And it's very unstructured journaling. I don't necessarily write about certain things. It's just like stream of consciousness, whatever comes. And if something serious came up the day before, I'll write to it. I'll be like, this is what came up. That voice, my inner child, my whatever was talking to me. And then I can just kind of talk back to it and explain to it why I think it's completely ridiculous and it's false. Or why it doesn't even mean anything. Like for example, if you have a voice telling you you're a failure, what does a failure even mean? Failing at what? Yeah. I can fail an exam. That's possible.
And that doesn't change anything.
It doesn't change it, but the voice, you're a failure. You're not good enough,
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not good enough in IT, for example. Yeah, I'm not good enough in IT. I never studied it. I'm not interested in it, but me, the person, good enough as a whole, so it's realizing that these things they don't mean anything. All that inner judgment doesn't mean anything. You're not pretty enough. Pretty enough for what? And this is what we put on our own children when we're questioning ourselves all the time. So yes, that inner judgment, is it ever fully released? I'm not sure, but I'm not even trying to fully, I'm not going to expect it to fully get released, because even if this one gets released, maybe another one's going to pop up that I've never heard before and I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And
it's like an onion,
it's like an onion, exactly. Exactly. So maybe, if I live to be 100 years old, maybe then I'll be like, aha. But for now, it's still.
We just keep going.
Yes, exactly. For now, we just keep going. And like I said, it's just about recognizing it and having a way to write about it, you know, you can have 2 columns, right? Like, this is the thoughts and the feelings that I had that made me feel like I was this, and that. And then this is my answer to this voice.
Okay, that's useful. Yeah, that's really useful.
I do that. And I've given this to parents as well sometimes. I've given this to parents when they have recurrent thoughts that are just very like, I'm not good enough. I need to do more. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You realize that these are they're like mental distortions.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's just the way that you're thinking. And then it's impacting the way that you're feeling, and your feelings impact the way that you're thinking. So you need to kind of recognize it and list it, and then have another column where you talk back to it. And do this regularly, because the more you do it, the more you're like rewiring yourself, right?
Yeah.
The more
Okay.
it's not a one-day thing. It's not a one-day thing. Yeah.
It's such a big process.
It's a long process, and it's part of the journey. And if you take it as part of the journey, it becomes just fun, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I find it's easier to accept the down times when you have this process, because you don't feel like the downtime is going to take over everything. What I mean by downtime, I mean like a bad, a bad feeling or a bad struggle, not downtime as in relaxing. I'm talking about like, a day
Like
where you don't
feeling
feel
bad.
happy, when you feel bad, or you've made a big mistake, if you focus on the mistake you've done as opposed to feeling like you're a mistake, you can write about it.
There's a big difference right there.
There's a huge difference. There is a huge difference. And I think very often parents do this.
Yes.
I'm a bad dad. I'm a bad mom.
And we say that to children, like, you're a liar, instead of you said a lie, and that's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't tell me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Instead of saying it like this, absolutely, you're lazy, instead of you don't want to do your homework. Because frankly, who wants to do their homework anyway? So
I really don't have a moral authority to say that to my kid.
Yeah, no, it's all these labels that we put onto them, and then they end up absorbing them. But so the next thing was, again, it all falls back into the same idea that parenting is hard because of what everyone else says.
Yes. Oh my God.
And this can be different for different parents, right? There are some parents for who it's their families.
Yes.
Their own parents. Like, they feel like they have to parent their children in a way that makes their own parents proud.
Yes.
But did you take the time to think about whether or not you enjoyed the way that you were parented, or you felt great as a child most of the time? Because no child feels great all the time. That's part of life. But, did you like the general feeling of your childhood? And is this what you want to pass on to your children? So for some people, it's their families. My mother says this, and it can really impact you. And for others, it's going to be their social circles. It's going to be their friends. Like, oh my God, you're feeding your kids Cheerios? Like, that's just really unhealthy, or my kid, I know, for example, my children, if it's cold outside and they want to go out in a t-shirt, I'm so over trying to make them wear a sweater. I'm like, the sweater's close by in case they need it. But sometimes like, oh my God, your kid's not dressed well enough, or your kid, their hair is so messy, or they don't have good enough grades. I can give you an example from this, actually, which was the beginning of me realizing that my parenting journey was a complete mess and I needed help. So this was maybe about 1 month before my friend got me the Awakened Family. My oldest son, they didn't have homework at school. They just had lessons that they had to practice, right? So it's not even mandatory. And because my oldest son has an easy time at school, I never forced him to do it. It was never like, you have to do this. You have to write your words 6 times. You have to read this. I was just like, whatever. We did it once on the weekend. It took 15 minutes and I didn't bother with it. And he would even tell me, Mom, I don't need to do it. It's a waste of time. But because everyone around me would say, oh no, but they have to learn to sit every day for 15 minutes after school. It's now that he's going to learn the proper routine and the proper discipline. He has to do this every day. It's important to have this. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm messing up. This isn't right. I've got to have my child sit down and do his work every day. And so I started to force him to do this. But I wasn't emotionally present for it at all, because I also had a 4-year-old and a newborn on my lap.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm trying to get my child, who doesn't really need to do the work,
Uh-huh.
force him to do the work, because everyone tells me he has to do the work. And I'm yelling. And he's like, I'm not going to do my homework. I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, I'm your mother. You're going to do the homework. And this is the source of this, was everyone else telling me he had to do it, and me being incapable of listening to my own voice and listening to my own child and seeing his grades that proved that he didn't even need to do that extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I would call one of my lowest points of parenting, when I would get to these insane power struggles with my 7-year-old over something that had nothing to do with him, or well, it had something to do with me, because it was my own wounds coming up. But intellectually, I knew he didn't have to do that. So this is, it's silly, but it's the kind of pressures that we put on ourselves because of what other people are saying about how your kids are supposed to look and study and eat and dress, and they have to do 5 sports or whatever it is,
Yeah, because it's like an insecurity, like it can't be that everyone is wrong. So if everyone is telling me you have to be pink, and I know inside my heart that I am not pink, that I am blue.
Yeah.
But everyone says pink. So it should be that the wrongness is in me, no?
Absolutely.
So it's this insecurity to not follow your inner voice.
Yeah.
And it just means that you need to work on your own inner voice again. Like
Exactly, because something else is popping up.
Yeah, like where this is coming from, this insecurity.
Exactly. Yeah. And you could have the insecurity pop up, and then you can look at it and say, like, no. I know who you are. I know where you come from. You don't come from me. You come from somewhere way in the past, and I don't need to listen to you.
Yeah.
Say thank you very much for making me doubt myself. I don't need you right now. I am blue.
Yeah.
I am blue. And the last topics about why parenting is very hard, the last two, and they kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we dive into parenting head first, and we drown in it. We start drowning into parenting, and we don't realize that there's no parenting without a healthy parent.
So you lose yourself.
You lose yourself. You lose your mind, your body, your soul. You lose all of it because you just sacrifice yourself. And I've done that. I don't know if you did this, Lourdes, at the beginning of your parenting journey, but I was the ultimate victim. And it took a lot of work for me to recognize where this victimhood was coming from. Recognizing it was one step of the process. It took a much longer process to try and release it. But I think we were all raised with this idea that being a parent means you sacrifice everything for your children. And it's such a lie. It's such a lie, because you want your children to love themselves, and they can only love themselves if you love yourself. Yeah. And you can only really give to your children what you've given yourself first. And I do believe
if you're empty, you don't have anything else to give.
Exactly. You can't give from an empty cup. I mean, I think everybody, but I think this generation is starting to hear this. I do believe that I'm hearing it a lot more. Maybe parents are not fully taking care of themselves yet, or taking care of themselves the right way. But, the myth of the parental sacrifice, we need to get rid of that. And of course, there are periods where you're in survival mode, right? Like if your kid's really sick for 5 days, and they're vomiting and they have fever, whatever, you have to be during these 5 days fully present for your child. And you may not take care of yourself, but if you've taken care of yourself regularly, when things are fine, when everybody's healthy, then you'll be able to handle this difficult time. So yes, not falling for this idea, especially mothers, right? Like I feel sometimes there's like a little bit of a competition between who's sacrificing the most or who has it the hardest. And it's not a good competition to have at all. And
the one who wins this competition is the one who loses the most.
Exactly. And is the one whose children lose the most. This is, you know, I think if we want to change that parent, I use mother as an example because I'm a mom and because I see this a lot in moms, but I think it exists with fathers just as much, right? So this is not to be gender specific, but if you take this parent who's constantly giving and angry and exhausted and, you know, victimizing themselves, if you tell them, it's not just that you who's losing, your child is losing. Your child is losing because they're going to see a stressed out parent and they're not going to learn how to take care of themselves. So that's a really important point. And again, hand in hand with that is celebrating our successes. I think as parents, we're constantly going to beat ourselves up on the back for all these things that we're not doing right. And we forget to recognize all of the things that we're going to beat ourselves up for the things we're doing wrong. And we're not going to recognize all of the things that we're doing right. And at the end of a day, when you feel really crappy, if you've had a crappy day and you feel like a bad parent, if you take the time to write out the things that you think you did wrong, say like, I yelled at my kid for not doing his homework, but alongside it, write all of the good things that you've done. You know, in the morning we cuddled, we had a fun, healthy breakfast together. You know, I worked really hard and I provided for our home and this and that. And my child is clean and we laughed in the car on the way home from school. I don't know, whatever it is, but celebrate all of your successes.
The small successes.
They're small successes. Celebrate all of those and stop focusing on that one thing you did bad. Yes. And some days you're going to have more than one bad thing, and that's okay. Recognize it, but always recognize that at the end of even a bad day, you've had some good times. I do this. If I have a horrible day, I haven't had one in a while, but if I have a really bad day with my kids, I remember there was one day during March break. It was what I would qualify as a complete disaster with my 3 children. And everybody felt it. And the next morning when I woke up, I made sure to write every single good thing that happened on that day. Because I'm trying to train myself to start seeing the good. I want to recognize the good because I'm not seeing it. I'm not lying to myself. I'm not inventing things that are not there. It's just our brain's going to go to where we made the mistakes. Our brain's going to go to the negativity in that day and how we felt bad. Because as soon as you start to feel bad, sometimes it's like it trickles out of like control. And it just it's like a negative cycle, more negative. So you forget all of the good things that are happening alongside. And so that next morning, I remember writing down all of the great things from that crappy day. I already knew the crappy stuff. I didn't need to write that stuff. And there was a lot of great things that happened on that day too. And it was a way for me to to release that day and to accept it. I can't stop another day like that from happening, right? It can still happen.
It's out of your control.
But it's a way to accept it and to move past it and to not hang on to the bad stuff. So yes, parents don't celebrate their successes. Yeah. They focus on the bad things that they do or the things that they can improve. And that's great. You need to focus on the things that you can work on, as long as you do it while realizing all the amazing things that you do already.
Yes, I think it's important to explain to our listeners that the brain does this because it's made that way. I mean, the brain chooses to focus on the negative stuff because it increases the probability to survive in an emergency. So it's your primitive brain, the one that's in charge of you making it live through every crisis, that's going to do this. So you have to make an effort, a conscious effort, and to train yourself to learn to focus on the positive things, because your brain doesn't know how to do that naturally. Your brain just goes to the negative stuff naturally because of survival. That's the way it's made. So you have to train yourself. You have to make an effort. And this journaling tip, to write at the list, it's a great way to train yourself. In fact, the tip I give to my parents is that before going to bed every day, they write at least one thing every day that makes them proud or that makes them happy about their day. So then you go to sleep and you focus on the positive while you're sleeping, and you process the positive. So you're training your brain.
Absolutely.
That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. And that's why people talk about gratitude journals all the time. It's not just about, trying to tell yourself you're grateful, actually recognizing it and writing it down. And again, see how neuroscience kind of like comes back in to back up all of the work that we do, because it is important. And I like that neuroscience backs up the work that we do, because some parents are skeptical if you come up with it's consciousness, and it's like, okay, I'm going to approach you with the science stuff, because
I don't want the energy magical.
Exactly. Exactly. So get to know your parents. Sometimes if you go to them with the more scientific things and the studies and like the psychologists, and then that's stuff that you can't refute. That's stuff that you're gonna have to listen to. So
So this really works.
I honestly, and I will say this, yes, the studies prove it. And me as a person, I'm a different person since I've started doing this. There is doing the work up until I started journaling, and then there is since I started journaling. And it's changed.
It really
everything.
Makes a difference.
It makes a world of
simple, actually.
difference. Yes.
Meditating, journaling, those are really simple solutions, and they really work. Yeah. And you have neuroscience books, whole books talking about how meditating works, because it works and it's amazing.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And you know what? This kind of almost ties into the last point in my article, which is how I think a lot of people don't want to meditate, or they don't want to journal, and they don't want to do that stuff because we live in a world of accomplishment. We live in a world of doing, and I have to do something useful that I can show, right? Like I need to be able to show something. This is why grades are important. Trophies are important. Reports are important. Percentages are important. And so sometimes people will feel like, oh, I'm just sitting there doing nothing. What do you mean? Like, I'm not going to just sit there and do nothing. Like, this is meditating is doing nothing. It's not actually helping me. I have other stuff to do.
How's that going to help?
Yes. And we do this with our own kids, right? Like I mentioned 2 points in there. Number one is that we see our kids as an accomplishment, right? I have my university diploma. I have my great promotion at work, and I've got my child. Look at my child. My child is a straight A student. My child is great. My child also won the trophy of, I don't know what sports, et cetera, et cetera. And automatically our kids absorb this and they become, look at me. I have my straight A's. I'm only worthy if I have my straight A's. I'm only worthy if I win my medal. So it's this world of constantly doing to accomplish and to achieve. But when you do this, you lose the essence of it all. And I also talk about how accomplishments for kids are just really different than for us. Of course, kids want to accomplish, but for them, building a Lego tower, that's an accomplishment. It has to be something that inspires them.
Because it's the small things, the ones we were telling to celebrate.
Yes, exactly. It's the small things that we want to celebrate. But because we can't showcase these things, because we live in a world where nobody cares that you're emotionally feeling well and connected to yourself, connected to your child, this society doesn't see that. Your boss doesn't see that. Social media doesn't see that. So a lot of us don't put in the effort because it's not recognized. It's not
So it's not
recognized
recognized
in a quantifiable and visual way.
Mm-hmm.
But those things that you can't quantify and see are the essence of what really matter. And I think that in the long run, through this essence, you could actually accomplish more of what matters. Like, you may not have 100 trophies in 100 different areas, but you might have that one accomplishment down a particular path that's very meaningful to you and to your child.
And the one where you are best at, because you can pretend to be your parents' trophy, and you can pretend to be a great volleyball player because your parents all won all these trophies from volleyball, and you should pursue a career on volleyball and win all these trophies for your parents. But your true self is maybe to be a musician.
Absolutely.
So if you could just realize what your true self is, you could pursue that, and you would be much better at it than volleyball.
Yep. And you're a lot more likely to recognize that if you don't have all the clutter around it, of all the extra stuff that you have added and that your parents have added for you. Because becoming a great musician, for example, means that you have to take the time and practice music, etc. It takes a lot of time. You don't have time to practice music. You got basketball practice or volleyball practice, and you have to be a straight A student, and you've got this huge, you got to get into this university and that, whatever it is. So you're not going to invest the energy where you may want to invest the energy. And, I don't want to tell parents that we want our kids to do nothing and to not accomplish anything. Not at all. I just want parents to see that kids are not your accomplishments, and their worth is not in that visible accomplishment that everyone else can see. But they can accomplish when they have the space to see and feel where they want to go.
Yeah.
They have to have that space, because like they say, for a child, their creativity is in their boredom. If you fill up every single minute, they're not going to get creative. And I've seen it myself. When they're doing too much stuff, when we're doing too many activities, the second they sit down, they get bored and angry because they haven't had any space for a while. And that's my cue as a parent to be like, okay, we're going to slow down for like a couple of days and just not do anything, because you need to kind of come back to yourself and not just constantly being stimulated by outings and activities. And even if they're not necessarily accomplishment based, but it's just a constant stimulation and activity that isn't boredom.
The difficulty I find in this is, how do you know if your child is connected or disconnected from his inner voice if you yourself are disconnected from yours? So that's why we say we should make our own work first.
Yeah.
Because then you won't recognize, why is he so different to you? Why does he wants to be a musician? Because you don't even know what you wanted to be in the first place.
And then sometimes that can trigger stuff like, well, I wanted to be a musician and I wasn't allowed to be because it was not accepted or it was not a good career. And so, no, you're not going to be a musician.
Life is unfair. Just deal with it.
Exactly. I'm just, giving examples of the type of things. I'm giving examples of the type of things that can come up. But, you don't have to tell your kid, sure, drop school and don't do anything and just become a musician. You could tell your child, okay, you know what, have your plan B. You need your education, you need this, but sure, do your music and see where it leads you. I know, yes, you can drop the volleyball, for example. But not only this, especially as your kids grow, like my oldest is almost 12. It's no longer just my influence and what I've put on him.
No.
It's what his peers and his environment is putting on him too. So it's even more important for us as parents to be more grounded and more present, so that we can see what's going on with the preteen or teenager in front of us, or even a primary school child. Are you starting to do this because everyone's telling you? Or are you starting to do this because there's an image associated with it? Is the school starting to make you feel like you need to accomplish this in order to be worthy? Like, it gets to an age where we're no longer, yes, we remain influential, but there's so many external influences that can come, and we have to be able to be aware and present to pick up on those, because our kids need that. They need us to be aware and present, to help them out when stuff's going to come up during these difficult years. And if you're not there, if you're like in a different world and you're swimming in your own stuff all the time, then you and your kids are both going to get lost.
What if someone realizes right now that it's just like that? If you're swimming in all these voices and you lost yourself and you don't know where this inner voice is, what's the tip you could give to these people? What should they do first to find themselves again?
To find themselves again?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I go back to journaling, which is just, you don't even have to look at it as journaling right now, as much as maybe a list of the things that are making you feel that you're lost. Why are you feeling that you're lost? What messages, what voices, what burdens are you carrying now that are making you feel this? Is it because you're saying yes to everyone around and you don't know how to set boundaries? Is it because you absolutely hate your job? Is it because you do everything for everyone in your family, for example? Is it because you're always yelling at everyone? Like, what is it exactly? So you actually have to identify what is telling you that you're drowning, and then pick one item and sit with it and try to see where that's coming from. Go back in time. Like, if you, for example, don't set boundaries and you say yes to everyone's asking you to pick up their child and to babysit their kid after school because they want to go do something else, and you always say yes. So instead of having your 2 kids at home, you've got 6 kids, all the time. Whatever, I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Why do you say yes all the time? Where did this voice come from? Were you expected to say yes all the time as a child? Did you have a parent who said yes all the time? Were you punished for saying no? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid people are going to reject you? Are you afraid, So I would pick one item of the items that make you feel lost and deconstruct it in this way. But of course, this is not the most important thing that you could do is talk to somebody. I think we underestimate the importance of having someone to talk to. Someone to talk to. It doesn't have to be, every week for months and years, but you need to speak to someone sometimes. Just like 3, 4, 5 conversations can change and really give you everything you need to change gears, and then you can go and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And then maybe 6 months later, something else is going to come up and you need to talk to someone again for, 3 to 5 weeks. And then you kind of restructure things again. You uncover a few more things and then you go off. And then if you get stuck again, you can reach out. But we have to destigmatize talking to people.
Yeah, it's important to realize that we are actually not alone.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Okay. So we ran out of time.
Great.
It was such a great conversation with you. Would you like to say something final to our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to just end on the note that parenting is what you make it out to be. It can be, as beautiful and as light as you want it to be, and it can be heavy and draining. And it's a lot of work, you know, it will be, and you're going to have your down days. But if you're having too many down days and it's really, really hard, it's important for you to recognize that it doesn't have to be like this. And with small shifts, one small shift at a time, don't shift everything. Don't shift everything overnight, but one small shift at a time, you can really alleviate a lot of these burdens.
And get a lighthearted parenting.
And become more lighthearted. Thank you so much, Lourdes, for having me here.
No, thank you for your time. It was great. So I'm going to tag you on the interview and the announcement. So all of our listeners can find you on the social media. And I'm going to publish your article also, so everyone interested can read it, because it's really great. And thank you for this chat. And dear listeners, thank you also for being here with us. Thank you for opening your heart, your brain, your soul to us. And we hope this was really useful for all of you. So keep enjoying the radio programs, and we'll listen to each other next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lourdes.